Today is part 2 of my response to a video called Top 5 Evidences of the Book of Mormon. I don't know why they always have to say evidences. Can't you just say evidence, please, guys? But I digress. Let's get into this video and see what else they have for us.
So I think the witnesses of the gold plates is a good evidence for the Book of Mormon and the authenticity of the plates. So we have both the three witnesses and the eight witnesses. So the three witnesses, we have David Whitmer, Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, who claim that they saw the angel, they saw the plates, and that they heard the voice of God. This was after the translation of the Book of Mormon, and that they had a vision of the plates.
Well, I guess that settles it. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thanks for being here. We have 11 witnesses, and I guess that's all we need. Have a good one. Nah, I'm just kidding. No way.
And that all three, not only do they never deny their testimonies of seeing the angel in the plates, but throughout their lives, they reaffirm over and over and over again, particularly David Whitmer, who's the most interviewed witness, that they know they saw the angel in the plates. And all three of them at one point leave the church.
Okay, some of them do come back, but he glazed over this, but some of them claimed to, I don't know how many, but some of them did claim to have seen this in a vision with spiritual eyes, not with like their actual eyes, which I think definitely like lowers the value of that particular testimony. But let's talk about eyewitness testimony for a second. In Africa today, there are Protestant preachers going around saying they're bringing people back from the dead. There are entire crowds of hundreds of people saying they're bringing people back from the dead, saying they're growing back people's limbs with prayer. Does this man, Stephen, I assume, does this man believe that? And if not, why not? What makes those hundreds of witnesses of people being brought back from the dead and limbs being healed less credible than these 11 witnesses? We don't know practically anything about the 11 witnesses in Mormonism. We know what they told us about themselves, but generally speaking, we don't know a lot about these people anyway. What makes them more credible than people in Africa claiming much wilder things than that? There have been apparitions of Mary where hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people have claimed to witness it. Do you believe in those? If not, why not? Surely there had to be people equally as credible as the 11 in the Book of Mormon that saw these things happen and said something about it. When Muhammad split the moon in half, people saw that. There were witnesses. Do you think that actually happened? If not, why not? See, by doing this, you can point out that witnesses aren't actually great when it comes to religion. Witnesses, I don't trust them. I just don't. And it's very odd to rely so heavily on them, but I understand why Mormons do it. I mean, they can't point to a single battle of the dozens of battles that Joseph Smith talked about that we've actually discovered. The coins, the coinage, not discovered any of it. Horse bones from the time of like the stories, nope, nothing like that. Any evidence that Semitic peoples were here before the Europeans came, most recently in the 1400s and 1500s? Nope, none of that. So when you have such an incredible dearth of actual evidence, witnesses are a very important thing, I imagine.
David Whitmer never returns, but Martin and Oliver do. But all three continue throughout their lives to bear testimony of the Book of Mormon. And critics, they tend to focus on a few second or third hand statements. Like,
People alive today bear testimonies that they were abducted by aliens or saw aliens at Area 51, sometimes perfectly otherwise credible people. Do you believe them? And if not, why not? They're witnesses and they're credible, and there are a lot of them. Do you believe them? I'd like to know.
Martin Harris, like I saw with spiritual eyes, or I saw the plates as I see a city through.
Martin Harris, the guy who transcribed all of this, he saw them through spiritual eyes. Here's another fun thing I ripped out of Doctrines and Covenants. I'm pretty sure it was Martin Harris, but it could have been somebody else. I haven't read Doctrine and Covenants in a while, but there is a set of stories in Doctrine and Covenants which unfolds in a very funny way, where one person, again, I believe it's Martin Harris, but I haven't read it recently, so I'm not sure, but there was one person who desperately wanted to have his own revelation. He wanted plates revealed unto him as well. And at first, in Doctrine and Covenants, it says that because of your faith and your faithfulness, God is going to bless you by giving you something to translate. But apparently, he was very impatient. So just like either one or two D&Cs later, it's changed. God is like, because of your impatience, you are no longer going to be allowed to transcribe anything except what Joseph does. Um, doesn't that seem like a huge cop out? Surely, before giving that, God would have realized, oh, he's going to be impatient. I can't say that. I can't say I'm going to let him do it since I'm not going to let him do it. But no, it's almost as if God didn't know. It's very suspicious. It's almost like Doctrine and Covenants is the product of a normal, ordinary man.
Mountain, or I think I saw Jesus in the form of a deer. And if you just focus on them, you might think, are they credible? Do they have this vision?
Yeah, that's a pretty crazy thing to say. I don't know why you would bring that crazy thing this man set up in your thing where you were trying to prove these people are credible. I saw Jesus Christ in the form of a deer is not something a credible, serious person says, and by saying it, you have actually damaged your cause even further.
Visionary mindset. But what was really enlightening to me was reading a lot of their primary statements, first or second hand.
I definitely feel like it should have been enlightening to you to see this man say he saw Jesus Christ in the form of a deer. That should have been plenty enlightening.
And a really great book is Investigating Book of Mormon Witnesses by Richard Lloyd Anderson, which I highly recommend. Is that the vast majority of their statements, they're emphatic that they know they saw the angel, they know they saw the plates. Martin Harris, there's so many times where people ask him, like, did you really see the angel in the plates? And he'd be like, do you see my hand? Like, as sure as you see my hand, I saw the angel in the plates. Or do you see the sun in the sky? As sure as you do, I saw the angel in the plates. And David Whitmer,
Well, color me impressed, why don't you? Random person who saw Jesus Christ as a deer says, as sure as my hand is here, as sure as Jesus Christ is a deer in my yard.
was once asked, are you sure you didn't like hallucinate or imagine or have some sort of mental disturbance? And he like emphatically responded like, no,
Hold on, let me ask Jesus, dear.
it wasn't a hallucination. I saw with my eyes, I heard with my ears, I know whereof I speak. And whether or not they really did see the angel in the plates, that's faith on our part. But if we're representing their testimonies accurately and being transparent, they know and are adamant they saw the angel in the plates. And added to that as well,
I think in cases like this, the important question to ask, what is more likely, by reality as we know it? That 11 people, 12 if you count Joseph Smith, were lying out of some form of embarrassment or true belief or some combination of these sorts of things, or that they were lying or that they were delusional or something like that, or that a random angel named Moroni decided to visit a con man in upstate New York and tell him about a bunch of like fictional battles that clearly never occurred because they didn't leave a shred of evidence, or is like Satan hiding the evidence or something. I mean, any naturalistic explanation you can think of is a lot more likely than, and then Joseph Smith was visited by an angel.
the Book of Mormon prophesies, both in the Book of Ether and I think it's 2 Nephi 27, and in the Doctrine and Covenants, that the three witnesses would see the gold plates. And if Joseph, made this all up, that's quite an amazing thing for him to prophesy. It's quite a bold thing to prophesy.
It definitely commits them to the cause, that's for sure, but I mean, the Bible has predictions that didn't come to pass, and then the Bible later on explains those predictions away in various ways. So let's say he had written about the three witnesses that they would never revoke their testimony or whatever. Literally, all he had to do if they did was just like write another chapter where he explains it away, just like happens in the Bible more than once.
Prophesy in the Book of Mormon, and then for all three of them to have this mass vision hallucination, audiovisual experience, which they all never denied. So I think that's
About 100 years ago in Portugal, there was something called the Miracle of the Sun, where 30 to 40,000 people saw what they deemed to be miraculous movements of the sun and a miraculous showing of lights sent by God, the Catholic one in specific, not yours. Um, so do you think they're credible? Do you think that they were all hallucinating? Because what seems more likely? They were hallucinating, or the sun was zigzagging all over the sky, casting new colors, and nobody else saw it. Which one sounds more likely there? So if all those people could be delusional or mistaken, why not the 11 witnesses of Joseph Smith? You find it very unlikely that these 11 people could all be delusional or confused or lying or whatever. But 30 to 40,000 people, yeah, well, I don't believe that. Isn't that very odd? Isn't it very odd how like religious people are always so skeptical of other people's stories, but when it comes to their own, they'll bend over backwards to justify it.
Quite remarkable. And I think the combination of the eight witnesses supports the authenticity of the plates. Because if you just had the three witnesses, you could say maybe they're all just had a mystic visionary hallucination. But the eight witnesses claim to see and handle the plates as well. And similarly, they never denied their testimony. It was very natural. They hefted the plates, they saw the engravings. And even though some left the church, John Whitmer, I remember one of his quotes when he was most disillusioned and antagonistic towards Joseph. He was asked, I think it was by Turley, but you're one of the witnesses of the plates. How can you be questioning? And he was like, well, yeah, I saw and handled them, but I don't know if they're authentic characters or not. So even when he was at his most disillusioned with Joseph, he still didn't deny seeing and handling the plates as well, supporting that there was the artifact. And then
So, if these 11 witnesses are that credible in your opinion, should we all become Catholic because 30 to 40,000 people who were Catholics were delivered a miracle that was foretold specifically beforehand? Should we all become Catholics now? Are you going to abandon your Mormon faith? If 11 witnesses impresses you that much, 30 to 40,000, it should be that much more impressive, shouldn't it?
then you've got other people like Mary Whitmer was shown the plates by the angel when she was milking cows. There's a couple of accounts like that. And other people like Emma or Josiah Stoll or other family members, Joseph Knight Sr., who claim to like feel the plates covered in the cloth, supporting that there is in fact a plate artifact. So for me, I think the combination.
They felt the plates covered in cloth. Everything they say makes it worse. I don't understand how Mormons can say this stuff and not realize that as they talk, they're making their own case that much less credible than it already was. Mormons. Do you want people to become Mormons? Okay, here's how you do that. Step 1, stop talking. Like that's the first stop talking because you're not convincing anybody. You're making the stories less convincing, okay?
Of the three witnesses, the eight witnesses, and other unofficial witnesses supports both the reality.
It's like that South Park episode where like as the story is being told, everybody stands like, so you Mormons know this story and they still think this guy was legit? Like as the story unfolds, there are more and more reasons to be skeptical. And it works I mean, obviously, Matt and Trey must be very familiar with Mormons, or at least one of them must be, because they definitely like captured that whole as these people talk, the story becomes less credible thing, and they don't even seem to realize it. It's very odd, isn't it?
Of gold plates and the authenticity of the Book of Mormon. And if Joseph made it up, then he would have had to like manufacture his own set of plates and then trick the eight witnesses. The three witnesses have some mass hallucination experience, which again was prophesied, and that's also pretty hard to believe. Like I know
If you prophesize something to somebody, are they not more inclined to take anything that happens as confirmation of that prophecy? Do not all humans have a superstitious bone within us? And these people, frankly, they sound very gullible anyway. Are they not that much more likely to like see anything that happens as confirmation once it has been prophesied, and they already are super superstitious, like super superstitious? Man, there's a combination, huh?
I know believing in an angel in plates is hard to believe. So I think their testimonies are powerful and support the divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon. I think that's one of the reasons why God provided it.
You know what I think? I think there are few things more perilous than being a Mormon apologist. Because one thing you'll see is like Mormon apologists will like try to respond to the problems of Mormonism, and eventually they get so deep into the facts surrounding Mormonism that they just decide it's not true. There is nothing more perilous to a Mormon than actually trying to find evidence that Mormonism is true. Because if they look hard enough, they'll find exactly the opposite.
Because if we just had, Joseph getting plates from a hill, claiming he got them from an angel, producing a book, and then the plates are taken away, it can sound a bit fishy, but I think that
A bit fishy. That's if you can recognize that it already sounds a bit fishy, why are you believing it? Why are you buying it? See, if you just turned your skepticism towards other religions on your own religion, you would find plenty of reasons to think, well, this is just nonsense. Because it is.
that's why witnesses were provided.
Yeah. And it's just like, what what do you do with these people? Like, you have to do something with these witnesses. Like, they're either telling the truth or they've been tricked somehow, but we're adamant throughout the rest of their lives that they weren't tricked. Like, how?
Well, I mean, they already said just a second ago that at least one person was not convinced by the things he said he saw. He said, "Well, I don't really know that those are actually what he says they are." So, I mean, that's at least like one of the 11 who's sowing some seeds of doubt here. Others did leave the faith, even if briefly. And I think that's also pretty telling. Like, if you are that convinced that what you saw is legitimate, you're not going to leave the faith. Which is one of the things that makes all of the stuff happening around the death and resurrection of Jesus that much more suspicious. If they'd really seen as much as the Bible says they has, nobody's going to be doubting that stuff.
How do you pull that off in 1829 rural New York? They were either tricked, telling the truth, or they were liars. And
some combination of those things. I'm sure that they were tricked in some cases, like the one guy who's like, I guess maybe was shown something and told it was something and it wasn't. Some of them were probably lying to save face. Some of them probably were telling the truth about like visionary experiences or dreams or whatever that they had. We just interpret the meaning of those very differently, as in those aren't from God. That's just something that can happen to people. It's been known to happen all throughout human history to people for different reasons. Something like 8% of Americans have hallucinated a dead loved one. And this crosses like all religious lines. So it's not like only Christians get to see dead loved ones. It happens to everybody. Or every group, at least. Not every person, but you get the idea.
And that's a lot of liars to round up.
Well, what about the 30 to 40,000 in Portugal? What do you think happened to them? I would really like to see one of these guys address that and tell me what happened there, because if those 30 to 40,000 people really experienced what they experienced, that proves the Catholic Church is true, because that was prophesied beforehand and then it happened. It was a confirmation of the Catholic Church and it was true. So, how do you explain that one, fellas?
And get to uphold this lie for the rest of their lives that like they suffered greatly for. Some of them, like Oliver Cowdery, lost work because of it, work opportunities, the great persecution throughout the years. Like, why would you uphold a lie like that? And some people say, well,
look at it like this. And one thing is the power of brainwashing. Think about Charles Manson. Charles Manson claimed to be a messiah, right? And his followers went to jail. How many of them recanted? David Koresh, a lot of people went down with the ship. Jim Jones, a lot of people went down with the ship. The fact that people are willing to live and die for something doesn't make that something true. That makes them willing to live and die for it. As we've seen all throughout history, cults, religions, whether they're true or not, people are willing to live and die by them. So
they didn't want to rat on Joseph because then everybody would know that they were liars, and they valued, their integrity.
Perfectly good explanation.
And it's like, if they valued their integrity that much, then they wouldn't have lied in the first place. Like,
you ever lied and regretted it? I know I have. You ever lied and got caught so deep in a lie, even a smaller one, that you would have been embarrassed to reveal it, and you just kind of like had to pretend it never happened or let it go or something like that? I have.
It's just, you have to do something with these witnesses, and I think you're right. I think it is one of the major, like, at least for me, it's a major obstacle in my way between me and the exit door when it comes to this faith. Like,
I think we should start running like betting pools on how long it will take people like this to finally convince themselves that Mormonism isn't true. Because like there's so many like ex-Mormons that used to be Mormon apologists that I thought like I was sure they would never leave, and then they did. So yeah, I think we should start running betting pools on this stuff. See who converts or deconverts and win.
I can't. I'm not going for that exit door without dealing with this. I have to deal with this, and just there are ways that people do it, and that's up to them.
I know one thing he won't deal with. He won't deal with the miracle of the sun. He won't deal with that. Even if he did see this video, oh my God, I would love to see how apologists respond to that one. That would be just magnificent, wouldn't it?
But I'm with you. I haven't found a way to kind of naturalistically explain away their testimonies.
You haven't found a way to explain away 11 people being wrong about something, mistaken about something, misled about something, or lying about something. I mean, Jesus, the Enron scandal had more people in all of those groups than the Book of Mormon stuff. And all of those people in the Enron thing, dead convinced that they're completely right about everything, just like the Book of Mormon stuff. People are weird, man. It's not that compelling.
And Richard Lloyd Anderson in his book, he had a lot of sources about David Whitmer or Oliver Cowdery, that these were really respected men in their community. I believe David later became mayor. Joseph was like a school teacher and then later a lawyer. So these were considered like honest, respectable men. So I think
Yeah, if you can't trust a lawyer, who can you trust?
a lot of critics believe they're more sincere.
Okay, maybe I shouldn't be that flippant about it, but somebody having a good profession or being known as an honorable or truthful person doesn't mean they can't lie or be wrong or mistaken or misled. It just doesn't. Again, 30, 40,000 people in Portugal. I imagine there were a lot of really respectable people among that crowd. Hell, January 6th, the insurrection. No doubt there were a lot of credible, respectable people who thought of themselves, or other people thought of them, as having integrity, who went to not just overthrow an election, but possibly an entire country. And now, a lot of them are in prison for it. People are respectable. I mean, they can, what's it called, compartmentalize these things. You can be respectable in one area and just like completely dishonorable in another area. People do this stuff. Think about all the serial killers, for example, who were described as upstanding members of the community. You could trust them with your life, except you couldn't.
Sincere but mistaken or hallucinated. But yeah, I think it's pretty impressive, the witnesses for the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
Awesome.
Number three.
Number three is old world geography convergences. I know you've done a previous episode on this, and you've had on Neil Rapley, who's like an expert. So Lehi and his family leaving from Jerusalem, traveling down to the Red Sea. There's plausible candidates for like the Valley of Lemuel and Shazer, and them traveling sort of in a southeastern direction, which scholars say.
Let me go ahead and tell you a couple reasons why this isn't going to be credible at all to me. I think the first reason is you can intuit a lot about geography from the Bible. The second one is for things in the Bible specifically that haven't been discovered or found, that probably never will, let's say that we had a good idea of where these things were supposed to take place, and then we never found evidence for them. A lot of people, apologists, will push those things off to some other place and say, well, actually, they happened here. Find no evidence there, move it to another place. Because it turns out, when it comes to things like geography, it's going to be vague enough that anything can fit anywhere. I mean, just like the Bible, too. Or we're veering very far off the topic here, but like this is a good illustration example, I believe. I follow these QAnon people on Telegram, and they do this thing, gematria, it's called. Gematria, whatever it is, where they add numbers together and get other numbers, and it's supposed to mean something, and they put random words together, and they mean like various things when they put the letters into numbers and plug those into little calculators of garbage they've found. And like they make so many connections between totally unrelated things: pop culture, society, music, video games, news, random Twitter posts, random Facebook posts. They can connect anything. And that's because the human mind has an incredible propensity for seeking out codes and patterns. So when it comes to something like geography, you can make any geological or geographical description fit almost anywhere at some point. I mean, it's not that impressive because you can be even you can make it sound pretty specific about what lies where, and somebody will find it. Somebody will find that there. Um, when it comes to a text like the Bible, like the New Testament versus the Old Testament, you got to ask yourself, why don't a majority of the Jews, and why did they never believe in Jesus as the Messiah? And it's because the Old Testament set them up for one particular idea of what the Messiah was supposed to be. Jesus did not and does not to this day meet the standards for what they expected the Messiah to be. But Christians believe he does. And the reason that they believe that is because they can go back to places like Isaiah 53 and read Jesus into that. Of course, if you read the rest of Isaiah, it becomes clear that the verses they think are referring to Jesus are actually about the state of Israel. But because of the human propensity to pattern seek, you can find anything in anything.
They correlates really well with the incense trail. And they're naming all these locations, and then they come to a place they say like which was called Nahum, where they bury Ishmael. I believe in the 90s they found an altar in Marib, Yemen, with the inscription NHM, and it's near like a burial site as well. And something that Neil Rapley, I don't know if he pointed this out to you. I haven't listened to your interview, but he said to me how before they found the altar, that scholars, when they've been analyzing the text of the Book of Mormon and Lehi's travel with Arabian geography, that was already the rough area that they believed Nahum would be. So finding the altar sort of confirmed that, okay, this is in the area where they're expecting to find it anyway.
This is what you call Mormon folk stories, essentially. Mormon folk stories, we'll call it Mormon folk archaeology or whatever. It's where they take something that seems to vaguely fit their story and claim it definitely fits their story. Now, with this specific example, I can't be sure because I haven't studied it. I'll go back to it after giving you my idea on what he's talking about here, but I got a couple ideas. The first one is they're misinterpreting something in that whole shrine or whatever it is. They're misinterpreting something. These people are misinterpreting. The Mormons are misinterpreting something, and the rest of people who have studied it completely disagree with their conclusions on it. The next thing is it could really be a thing, but it could also be a thing that was just read into from the Bible and just happened to be in the right place. That's one. That's another explanation. So now that I've gotten those two quick explanations out of the way, I'm gonna actually look this up and come back to you with more information. Courtesy of Wikipedia, known criticisms include the following: the fact that the Book of Mormon does not explicitly mention contact with outsiders during Lehi's journey. It is suggested that the pronunciation of NHM is unknown and may not relate to Nahom at all. It has been suggested that Joseph Smith simply created the name Nahom as a variant of the biblical names Naham, Nehum, and Nahum. It has been said that the link between Nahum and Neem, as spelled in Niebuhr's work, is invalid because the vowels between the names Nahum and Neem do not match, stating that only 3 of the 5 letters in Nem agree with the spelling of Nahum. The second letter in Nem is E rather than A, and the fourth letter is H instead of O. The variant spellings of Nahim, Neem, Neem, Nam, and Naham do not really help to solve the problem. Some indicate that the modern vowel variance is to be expected because Hebrew does not have written vowels. Okay, so great. There's a bunch of explanations already, and the only people who believe these things are related are Mormon scholars. That's it. That's the only people. Only Mormons. That's it. The average archaeologist or outside scholar is probably not going to have a bias against Mormonism being somewhat true. But the average Mormon scholar is definitely going to have a bias in favor of Mormonism being true, which means it's pretty clear who is the least reliable when we are talking about things like this.
And it dates to the right century. It has the right consonants. There's no vowels in Hebrew or Semitic script, and it dates to the right time. And even told me that they found the name Ishmael dated to the 5th or 6th century, but there's no way we can know it's the right one. And some people might say, okay,
wouldn't that have been like a really super common name back then? It's like just adding coincidences together and being like, aha, facts.
This is just a coincidence. It's just NHM on an altar. And I believe the word Nahum in Hebrew, it sort of has meaning to mourn or console. And it talks about in the text that the daughters of Ishmael did mourn over the death of their father. So this could maybe be a Hebrew pun. But what I think converges really well, not just like Nahum, but the whole travel, especially is the nearly eastward turn to Bountiful, because there's a turn in the Incense Trail, and scholars have found a couple of candidates for Bountiful. One is
If it were that accurate, if the geography were really that accurate, shouldn't there be like less than a couple? Shouldn't you be able to nail it down pretty solidly? I mean, if you got a couple, that already says the thing is vague enough to be placed in a couple different places. That's just how geography works, though. I mean, like, again, with the Bible itself, people have just like just so many different places where any given thing that happened there could have been. So it's not going to be compelling. Geography convergences, as they call it, is just not going to be compelling at all.
Cor Carfot, and it matches sort of Nephi's description for Bountiful really well. It talks about there being, timber and honey, or cliffs, lots of fruit, and being like this lush oasis on the coast.
Somebody openly, blatantly plagiarizing the Bible is going to get a good idea of what the Middle East was like at the time from reading the Bible. Like, they're going to have an understanding of what the Middle East was like in ancient times because their source material is from there in ancient times. I don't get it, man. I don't get it. I don't get how these people just... Actually, I do get it. It's like, obviously, if you really want something to be true, you'll, again, bend over backwards trying to make it so. Archaeologists aren't out to get the Mormons. But to the Mormons, the very fact that they're finding all of these things, which are pretty obviously just coincidences at best, and straight out misinterpretations at worst, the fact that they're finding all these things and no one else is means the whole world is stacked against the Mormons. But that's just not how the world works. There is no gigantic international anti-Mormon conspiracy. The more you look at the church from the outside, the more apparent it becomes that the church itself is the big conspiracy.
Coast of Arabia. And to me, it just seems to converge really well. The whole travel in the Arabian geography. I don't know if I would say like this is 100% bullseye that proves the Book of Mormon. It'd
That's good because it's not. Like, it's just not.
be nice if we had like an inscription like Nephi was here. But the question I've sort of asked myself is if this was a historical travel, what better evidence realistically would I expect to find? And I feel like it all correlates and interlocks.
You can find some really good evidence for things that happened in the ancient world. These are important things you're talking about here. This is not unimportant stuff. If these were historical events, they are some of the most important historical events to ever happen. The fact that we have so many lesser historical events than this stuff sort of implies your thing didn't happen.
Really well together, supporting that. I think this was a historical travel. So I think
to favor that, you have to ignore all outside experts saying, no, y'all are just misinterpreting things because you want to believe.
the old world geography is supportive evidence for the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, we had Neil on and he talked all about it, and it's compelling. Like, and again, it's either a really interesting coincidence, but at the same time, like, what are the chances, that Joseph Smith would just happen to pick a name in that, secluded desert location that just happened to match.
It's not a match. It's a little bit similar, but it's not a match. Again, as I noted in my reading of Wikipedia back there are names very similar to Nahum in the Bible. It seems like Nahum is a corruption of other names in the Bible. I mean, plus, it's been shown more than once that a lot of these names that Joseph Smith used that don't appear anywhere else in the Bible don't match any known scripts of that time. I mean, like, they don't match any like known names of that time or conventions of that time. So it does seem like your guy was making stuff up here. But yeah, Nahum seems like possibly a corruption of other names that are actually from the Bible. So it makes sense that if you're literally just like taking names from the Bible and changing around letters Every now and then you're going to find something out there that comes somewhat close, but it is not an exact match. It's a partial match at best. It's not very compelling.
An actual place in that secluded desert location.
These are letters on a tomb or something. They're not fingerprints, bro.
At that same time. Like, it's just like weighing the probabilities there. And then the other thought is, okay, well, maybe Joseph was just doing some kind of really deep research. And
We'll see. Whenever I was
I like how many possibilities they ignore. But I have to say, when it comes to stuff like this, again, even the most unlikely possibility with a naturalistic explanation is infinitely more likely than stuff like whatever they're believing happened. Like, it's infinitely more likely that Joseph Smith stumbled upon an ancient book written by somebody that describes that thing, and then he just wrote that down. And that is infinitely more likely than an angel visited him with golden plates and made him transcribe them from a hat.
a critic or an unbeliever, whenever I really looked at how well it converged together, I think I watched like an LDS Truth Claims episode and I think a video you did in Evidence Central whenever I was out of the church. And I thought to myself, this converges too well in my mind to be a coincidence. Joseph must have had a map, something of Arabia that he was drawing upon because it just seemed to converge.
Well, there you have it, folks. You'll believe if you want to believe. Exhibit A. Stephen, I guess. Maybe this guy's Stephen. I haven't been paying attention to their names or anything. I think that guy's Stephen. Whichever guy it is, I mean, it's both of them, really. I don't know which one Stephen is, but if you want to believe something bad enough, you'll create a YouTube channel just stringing together little coincidences and unreliable claims and just like have field day with it. Just make your imaginary stuff real. So this video is getting kind of long though, so thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Hopefully there'll be a part 3. Have a good one.